was supposed to be simple. Just a few cycles of growth hormone my buddy Ilya gave me. Nothing crazy. Dude, it's totally safe, Ilya said, shoving the first vial into my hands. Cutting edge, bioengineered, next level stuff. Athletes use it all the time. Seriously? I asked. Seriously. He laughed, patting my shoulder. 6 months, and you'll look like a god. Trust me. For months, Ilya had been on me about this transformational fitness thing, some program he called X80. It sounded like a scam, but Ilya wanted to do a before and after for his YouTube fitness channel. At first, it was fine. Eating clean, drinking gallons of water. By the end of the first week, I noticed changes. Tighter arms, veins popping where they hadn't before. It felt good. By the second week, it felt too good. I was waking up hours before my alarm, buzzing with energy. It was like something inside was pressing outward, keeping me awake. I couldn't stay in bed. By sunrise, I'd already run 5 miles, prepped my meals, and cleaned my apartment. "How's my champion?" Ilya asked over the phone. "Good," I admitted, pacing my living room. "Maybe too good." He laughed. "That's the growth hormone kicking in. It's a cheat code for life, man. You're gonna crush it." And I did. The gym felt like a playground. Weights lighter, muscles swelling. People noticed. The squat rack guy gave me a respectful nod. A cute blonde on the elliptical smiled. By Friday, I'd gained 5 pounds of muscle, and my shirts were tight across the shoulders. That weekend, Ilya brought over another vial. "Cycle 2, he said, grinning. By the third week, something shifted. It started small. In the mirror, my reflection didn't seem right. My muscles had striations, deep splits between fibers, like they were pulling apart. Running my hand over them, I felt cords straining under the skin. It wasn't painful. That's what scared me most. When Ilya stopped by unannounced, he burst out laughing the second he saw me. "Dude, you look insane. It's working." "Is this normal?" I asked. "Yeah, man," he said, barely looking. "That's just the hypertrophy. It means it's working." By midweek, the buzzing energy came back, only stronger. I felt unstoppable, elevated. That night I went to a club downtown, something I hadn't done in years. Women danced with me, their hands everywhere, pulling me closer. By the end of the night, I left with 2 of them. Afterward, I barely remembered what happened. Just flashes of a hotel room, their voices whispering how amazing I looked, how strong I felt. In the bathroom later, I spat into the sink, and something solid hit the porcelain, a molar. The gum beneath was smooth, like nothing had been there. I texted Ilya. He sent back a laughing emoji. I wasn't sure he even read the message. The next morning, I woke drenched in sweat. My head pounded, and my skin felt tight. I didn't tell anyone. By the 4th cycle, I stopped questioning the changes. The growth was addictive. I felt stronger every day, benching 3 plates, sprinting faster, and flexing in the mirror to admire the way my muscles swelled. But the side effects were impossible to ignore. At the gym, I started hearing wet, shifting sounds every time I moved. When I benched, something under my shoulder blade shifted. Sitting up, my lat didn't settle back into place. I pushed it into position with my fingers. It didn't hurt. After another club bender, I stood shirtless before the mirror, running my hands over my abdomen. The gaps were deeper now, like hollows between the muscle. Pressing into one, my fingers sank. The tissue felt soft, malleable, like clay. When I pulled back, the muscle slowly filled in, smoothing over as if nothing had happened. There was something else, a slit along my inner thigh, like a seam that had opened. Pressing around it, the skin gave way. My thumb slid in easily. I started wearing long sleeves. Ilya joked I was trying to hide the gains. I laughed along. By the 5th cycle, my life revolved around the hormone. Each week followed the same pattern. Injections on Monday, a manic high by Wednesday, and a crash by Sunday. During the highs, I felt invincible. I lived like nothing mattered. But the crashes grew worse. The muscles in my legs shifted as I stood, and sitting, I could feel parts inside me rattling loose. One Sunday morning, a sharp pain in my back jolted me awake. Reaching around, my fingers brushed something hard, bone pressing unnaturally against my skin. I stumbled to the mirror, twisting to get a better look. There it was. A ridge of muscle along my spine, bulging out unnaturally, detached. When I pressed it, it shifted back into place with a soft pop. Ilya dropped by later with another vial. "You're killing it, man. You'll look insane by the end of this." "I think something's wrong," I said, showing him the bulge. He waved it off. "That's just your body adjusting. Trust the process." Everything felt out of control. The gaps between my muscles no longer closed. My skin felt stretched too thin over a body that didn't feel like mine. Some nights, I lay awake, muscles shifting under my skin like wet paper sliding apart. Yet, I couldn't stop. Ilya kept pushing, promising it would be worth it. Part of me believed him. Quitting now felt like failure. But deep down, I knew. This wasn't normal. One night, standing shirtless in front of the mirror, I pressed into one of the larger gaps along my ribs. My fingers sank easily, the tissue parting without resistance. Beneath the surface, I felt something firm, pulsing faintly. Pulling my hand away, I stared at the clear, viscous fluid dripping from my fingers. The buzzing in my chest came roaring back during the 7th cycle. It felt more like hunger this time, a gnawing need that drove me out into the city, searching for something I couldn't name. At a club, it wasn't the music or women that drew me. It was the lights. The pulsing strobes matched the rhythm pounding in my chest. My body vibrated in sync with something just beneath the surface. By the time I got home, my body buzzed as if it might split apart. The gaps widened with every breath. In the shower, I kept my eyes closed. The water hit me differently, seeping into the openings like I was a sponge. It pooled inside me, soaking places it shouldn't. I didn't sleep. Sitting on the edge of my bed, I stared at my reflection in the window. Something moved beneath my skin. Slow, deliberate, pressing against the gaps like it was testing the boundaries. I tried calling a doctor, but each time I unlocked my phone, I ended up scrolling through old photos. 6 months ago, I barely looked like myself. It got worse in the following days. Bending to tie my shoes, I felt something shift under my ribs. I stopped eating regular meals or sleeping regular hours. Scratching my shoulder, I felt the muscle hanging loosely, unconnected to anything solid underneath. I thought about stopping the workouts, but every time I even considered it, the gap seemed to widen. "You're almost at the finish line," Ilya said, but I didn't think there was a finish line. One morning, I woke and couldn't stand straight. The muscles in my lower back had separated completely. Reaching around, I slid 2 fingers between the fibers. It didn't feel human anymore. The tissue was slick, smooth, and deep inside. I felt something hard, something that wasn't bone. Ilya showed up the next morning without calling. "Bro, get dressed. We're doing the final reveal today." "I'm not feeling up for it," I said. He just grinned. "Come on, man. This is what we've been working for. You killed it. People are gonna lose their minds." I wanted to refuse, but I didn't. Ilya had a studio set up at his place, with lights and stuff. He had done a bunch of promotion for the reveal, and there were lots of people tuning in. I thought about leaving, but he clapped me on the shoulder and shoved me forward. "Time for the big moment," he said. I felt pinned under the lights. Ilya raised his phone, filming as I pulled off my hoodie. At first, I thought it was nerves making me sweat, but when I looked down, the sweat wasn't sitting on my skin. It was pooling in the gaps between the muscles, trapped. The comments started rolling in. Someone said I looked like one of those anatomy charts. I glanced at my arms. The muscles stretched apart, the gaps widening further than they ever had. Ilya's friend, Jason, who was helping with production, said, Dude, is that normal?" Pointing at me. I caught my reflection in a mirror. Something inside my chest cavity shifted. Dark, slick, sliding under the surface like an eel. "Jesus Christ, what is that?" Jason asked. He looked sick. Ilya stepped closer. "Relax. He's fine." I could feel it coiling around my ribs, pressing through the gaps where muscle used to be. I looked down as something pushed through my abdomen. It wasn't bone. It wasn't muscle. It was smooth, glistening, pulsing like a heartbeat. Jason stepped back. "You need a hospital?" he stammered. Ilya reached out, his hand on my shoulder. His fingers sank in too deep. He swore under his breath and yanked his hand back, his palm slick with the same clear fluid that seeped from me every night. For the first time, I saw real fear in his eyes. "All right," he said. "Maybe we call it for today." I drove home alone, trying to hide under my hoodie. The thing inside me shifted, pressing against my lungs, filling spaces that didn't exist 6 months ago. By the time I got back to my apartment, I could barely stand. In the bathroom, under dim light, I pulled off my shirt. The gap stretched wider than ever, running from my ribs to my pelvis. I pressed a hand into one, reaching inside as though I could pull the thing out. Instead, my fingers found something new. Teeth. Rows of them, sharp and small, lining the edges of the gaps. I yanked my hand away, staring at the pale imprints they left on my skin. This thing wasn't me anymore. I stood in front of the mirror as the gaps in my chest expanded. I pressed against the thing inside. It pushed back. When I pulled my hand free, it was coated in that same clear fluid, dripping onto the floor. A knock came at the door. "Are you all right?" It was Ilya, and he sounded scared. I didn't answer. Whatever was inside moved again, stretching my skin to its limit. The knock came louder. "David?" My reflection blurred as the gaps tore open. Fluid spilled onto the floor as I fell to my knees, gasping. Something dark and slick emerged from the spaces between my ribs, glistening under the light. The door burst open. Ilya stood frozen, his face pale. What the hell? I looked up at him, my voice a whisper. It's working. I was browsing a fitness forum late one night, looking for advice on supplements, or maybe just something new to try. I came across a post about this supplement called PX7 Max Enhance. People claimed it boosted their energy and focus, and helped them push through plateaus at the gym. It seemed pretty impressive. The only place to buy it was through a small website someone linked in the thread. The site was basic, but it had all the product details. The label described it as an advanced performance formula designed to improve strength, endurance, and mental clarity. There wasn't much scientific info to back it up, but it was only around $40, and it sounded like something that might be worth a shot. About 2 weeks later, a small box showed up on my doorstep. The label on the supplements was simple, had a warning about taking 1 capsule only, and a note saying it wasn't FDA approved. There was a small warning on the bottle as well. It said, "In rare cases, users may experience psychological effects, including vivid dreams, changes in perception, or feelings of dissociation. These effects are typically mild and transient, resolving within a few hours without intervention." I still wasn't sure if I'd actually try it, but something about it kept me curious. The next morning, I decided to give it a shot. I followed the instructions, 1 capsule with a glass of water before my workout. After about 30 minutes, I could feel it kicking in. This steady rush of energy that felt clean, like I'd had the perfect amount of coffee without the jitters. By the time I got to the gym, I was laser focused. Every rep felt easier, like my body was just there for it. I was hitting weights I usually struggled with, and still had gas in the tank. Over the next few days, it only got better. My workouts were longer, and my recovery time seemed shorter. I wasn't dragging myself out of bed in the mornings anymore. I'd wake up ready to go, feeling amazing. Even outside the gym, things felt different. My mood had lifted in this way I hadn't expected. It wasn't like I was euphoric or anything, but I felt like I was on point. Tasks that normally felt like a grind were suddenly no big deal. By the end of the first week, I was all in. My body felt stronger, my mind was sharper, and I was more productive than I'd been in months. Whatever was in that capsule, it seemed to be working. The only side effect that stood out was the dreams. They'd started sometime in the first week. Dreams vivid enough that I'd wake up remembering every detail. They weren't bad or anything, just weird and really intricate. One night, I dreamed I was running through an endless field. The grass so tall it brushed my shoulders, and I could feel every step as if it were real. Another night, I dreamed about people I didn't recognize. But in the dream, it felt like I knew them my whole life. I figured it was just part of how the supplement worked, maybe some side effect of the energy boost, or the improved focus. It didn't seem like a big deal. If anything, it was kind of fascinating. About a week and a half in, I had a dream that was different. I wasn't running or wandering. I was in a gym. It was empty, except for a few people. Most of them were working out silently, not paying any attention to me, but one guy stood out. He wasn't lifting or stretching. He was just standing near a squat rack, looking right at me. He was tall, with a buzz cut, and a distinctive face, sharp in a way you wouldn't forget. He didn't move the whole time I was there. It wasn't threatening exactly, but there was something about the way he was staring that felt unnerving. When I woke up, I couldn't shake the feeling. It stuck with me all day. The next day I was at the gym, just getting started when I saw him. The guy from the dream, It was like a doppelganger. Tall, buzz cut, that sharp, distinctive face. He was leaning against the wall near the free weights, not really doing anything, just standing there. I told myself it couldn't be the same guy. My brain probably pulled his face from some stranger I'd seen before and stitched it into the dream. The guy was looking at me, like he recognized me. I caught him sneaking glances between sets. I went back to my workout, trying to focus, but I couldn't stop checking to see if he was still there. After a while, I moved to a different area, thinking maybe he'd stop if I wasn't near him. It worked. When I glanced back, he was gone. I told myself I just imagined him watching me. Maybe he was zoning out, or maybe I'd been looking at him more than I realized, and he thought I was staring at him. That explanation felt good enough for a little while, but later, as I was leaving, I saw him again. He was outside, standing near the parking lot, just standing there, looking in my direction. I got in my car as fast as I could and drove home, rationalizing everything that just happened. By the time I got home, I had convinced myself it was just a weird hallucination or after effect from the vivid dream. That the dream was so real, I had created some kind of false memory and attached it to a stranger at the gym. I probably freaked that poor guy out, I thought to myself. But there was a small part of my thinking that was different, that wanted to believe that whatever had happened was part of something bigger, something that was just starting to unfold. That night, I had another dream. I was back in the gym, but it wasn't the same. The lights were dimmer, and the whole place felt hollow, like a version of it that was half built. There weren't many people there, but the guy was. He was standing in the same spot as before, near the squat rack. This time, he wasn't still. He was walking toward me. I wanted to move, but my legs wouldn't work. He just kept getting closer until he was right in front of me, staring down at me. I couldn't make sense of his expression. He didn't look angry or happy or anything. He just looked at me, his face blank. I woke up with a jolt. At the gym the next day, I kept looking over my shoulder, half expecting to see him again. He wasn't there, but I couldn't relax. I was jumpy the whole time, like someone was watching me even when the place was almost empty. That night, I skipped the supplement. I didn't want to admit it was connected, but part of me wondered if it was. Still, I couldn't bring myself to throw the bottle away. The next day I felt slow and heavy. I could barely make it out of bed. Without thinking, I took the supplement, and within 30 minutes, I felt good again. I should have known right then what was going on. The truth is, I probably did. But I just loved how I felt, and how I looked. I couldn't stop. At the time, I told myself that the side effects were just stress, or my body adjusting to the supplement. I was sleeping erratically. The weird part was, I didn't feel completely drained. I should have been collapsing by then, but I wasn't. It felt like I'd bypassed exhaustion and gone straight into overdrive. I wasn't eating much either. Food seemed pointless. I didn't feel hungry, and the thought of chewing or swallowing made me feel sick. All I wanted was water, and even that didn't taste right. When I finally did sleep, it was never for very long, maybe an hour or two at most. But the dreams came back. They were even more vivid than ever. I dreamed of the gym again, of endless hallways and empty spaces that felt too big to be real. There were more people this time, faces I didn't recognize but somehow knew. They all seemed to be watching me, whispering to each other, but I could never hear what they were saying. When I woke up, I started seeing those faces in real life. Not all at once, but one by one. At the grocery store, the bank, even just walking down the street. I'd spot someone, and my stomach would drop because I knew them from my dreams. I thought I was just imagining it. Maybe my brain was playing tricks on me because I wasn't sleeping. But I started noticing how they acted. They'd look at me, then look away like they didn't want to be caught staring. Or they'd cross the street when they saw me coming, trying to avoid me. By the end of the week, I was convinced these people were following me, not just at the gym, but everywhere. They weren't random strangers anymore. They were part of something, like a coordinated effort to track and monitor me. I started avoiding places I usually went. If I recognized someone, I'd turn around and leave immediately. I stopped going to the gym altogether because I couldn't handle the feeling of being watched. Even at home, I didn't feel safe. Every time I looked out the window, I'd catch a glimpse of someone lingering across the street or walking past my building, just a little too slowly. I tried telling myself it was all in my head, but it didn't matter. The feeling was real, and it wasn't going away. I barely slept anymore, maybe an hour here or there, and when I did, the dreams just got worse. The people were waiting. They'd be standing in doorways, at the ends of hallways, or right outside the windows. They never moved, but I could feel the tension, like something was about to happen. When I woke up, it didn't feel like I was leaving the dream behind. It felt like I was still in it, just a different version. I stopped leaving the apartment altogether. I pushed my couch up against the door, locked all the windows, and sat in the corner with my phone in my lap, trying to figure out what the hell was going on. That's when I started seeing the patterns. The people I recognized weren't random. They showed up in clusters, always at certain times of the day, always near places I used to go. It wasn't a coincidence. They were organized, a network. I found myself pacing my apartment, going over every interaction, every face, every detail. I wrote them down, filling page after page with names, places, and times. It was all connected. I just needed to figure out how. I hadn't slept in days, and I wasn't eating at all. My reflection in the mirror looked like someone else, pale, gaunt, hollow-eyed. But I didn't care. I just needed to figure out who they were and what they wanted. Eventually, I had to leave the apartment. I don't know if it was the hunger or just the sense that staying inside wasn't any safer than going out. But something pushed me to open the door and step outside. But when I got outside, I knew something was wrong. The air felt heavy, like it was pressing down on me, and the world looked different. Colors were muted, but the shadows were darker, stretching in directions that didn't match the light. Every sound felt louder, closer, like it was happening right next to my ear. People passed me on the street, but they weren't just walking by. They were watching me. Some would glance out of the corners of their eyes, quick and subtle, but others didn't bother hiding it. They'd turn their heads, tracking me as I moved, their expressions blank. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being followed. I'd walk a few blocks, then stop and turn around, but no one ever looked out of place. Still, I knew they were there, watching me from windows, parked cars, street corners. It was getting dark, and I was miles from home. I hadn't eaten all day, and my legs felt weak, but I couldn't bring myself to stop. Being still felt like giving up, like letting them catch me. I started ducking into alleyways, looking for places to hide. Some were empty, others filled with dumpsters and trash that reeked so bad I almost gagged, but I didn't care. I just needed to get off the streets, out of the open. At first, the alleys felt quiet and safe, but as the night dragged on, I started noticing sounds hidden in the silence. Glass breaking in the distance, sirens, footsteps echoing on concrete. Things started closing in on me again. My mind was raving. I moved from one alley to the next, staying low, trying not to be seen. But no matter where I went, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being followed. I started hearing whispers coming from everywhere, and the shadows started moving, taking on threatening forms. They stretched toward me, darting across walls, even when nothing was there to cast them. I started seeing figures slipping between the cracks, their movements too fast, too smooth to be real. I pressed myself against the wall, trying to stay as still as possible, but they were closing in, their whispers growing louder, surrounding me. I bolted. I didn't know where I was going, but I ran until my legs gave out and I stumbled into an open area. It wasn't until I stopped to catch my breath that I realized where I was. There were people scattered around, their figures silhouetted against the dim glow of streetlights. I thought they were walking dogs, but the animals didn't look normal. They were distorted and grotesque, with glowing eyes that cut through the dark. I was frozen with fear. The dogs were circling, sniffing the air, their movements predatory. The people holding their leashes weren't trying to stop them. They were letting them hunt. One of the creatures broke away from the others, its eyes locking onto mine. It started toward me, its growl low and rumbling, vibrating through the ground. I didn't think. I lunged at it, grabbing for its neck, trying to wrestle it down. Its fur was rough and wiry under my hands, and its teeth snapped inches from my face. I couldn't tell if it was barking or screaming. The sound was so unnatural, but I wasn't letting go. The fight felt endless. Claws tearing at my arms, teeth snapping at my throat. Dark figures gathered around me, pointing and whispering. I saw lights flashing, and all of my senses blended into a writhing mass of terror. And then everything went black. When I woke up, it felt like I was underwater. Everything was muffled, and my head was pounding. My body felt heavy, like it wasn't mine. I tried to move, but I couldn't. My arms and legs were pinned down. I was in some kind of hospital room. The walls were pale blue, and there was a faint beeping sound somewhere nearby. But I wasn't just pinned down. I was restrained. Thick straps held my wrists and ankles to the bed. I tried to pull against them, but it was no use. There was a window on the door, and for a moment, I thought I saw someone peering through it. A man. But before I could focus, he was gone. I laid back, my head swimming, and let the exhaustion pull me under again. The next time I woke up, the restraints were gone. My wrists and ankles still ached where the straps had been, but I could move now. A doctor was sitting in a chair near the bed. He asked me how I was feeling, and if I remembered anything that happened. I tried to think. The alleyways, the shadows, the dog. It didn't make sense. It felt like a vivid dream. The doctor told me I was admitted after an incident at a dog park. Witnesses reported that you attacked a dog, claiming it was some kind of creature. I didn't know what to say. He said they found some capsules in my pocket and sent them to the lab for testing. He asked what they were and if I had been taking them. "They're supplements," I told him. "I've been taking it for a couple weeks." Then he said, "It's a designer stimulant. we've seen a handful of cases involving it recently, all with similar symptoms: insomnia, paranoia, hallucinations, even violent behavior. It's not FDA approved, and there's very little oversight on how it's made. What you experienced was a form of stimulant-induced psychosis. He told me I would be under observation for another 48 hours and then released. I laid back down, staring at the ceiling, my mind spinning. I wanted to believe it was over, that it was just the pills messing with my head, but I still couldn't tell what was real and what wasn't. I felt my eyes droop with exhaustion and then fell back into sleep.